TC, some have taken to call this part of the program the newsletter cast, and I'm kind of digging it.
I love it. I think it, and not only do I love it, but I think it's accurate. It's taking what's from the newsletter and bringing it to life.
Well, the newsletter are the headlines of the day.
Exactly.
But by this part of the program, what we tend to do is we've covered the front page. We'll cover the front page again, but then we talk about the things that are not on the front page. And frankly, because they all come from my show prep and I publish my show prep in a daily newsletter, it's the newsletter cast.
Right. So we're scrolling down and we're getting to even the ones that are on the back page, the sports page, the business page. Yeah, I think people are really loving it.
Although I don't know if that name sticks. I don't
newsletter
know if
cast, is it too long?
Newsletter cast.
Newsletter cast.
Newsletter. I also notice, and by the way, people are talking, as you would say, that because the newsletter cast for the last 3 days or so has been on YouTube as well, you seem to have upped your game, or am I mistaken?
Well, I have to say, Michael, the camera is indeed
cosmetics involved?
10 inches away from me.
Genucell?
Genucell, right here. Thank you very much. Absolutely. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I wearing lipstick? Why, yes, I am.
Seriously, you are. Am I right? You're like, because of this, like all of a sudden it's a new TC.
Well, radio is so great because there's no hair and makeup required, and I'm all about that.
Share.
That would be athleisure.
Yeah.
Athleisure. Yeah, well,
Yeah, but you're not wearing athleisure today, are you?
No, I'm quite fancy.
Yeah. So just to review, and then we'll move on to the headlines.
To the real stuff?
When there are cameras involved, there's lipstick, and there's no athleisure wear.
You are correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Just wanted to get that straight.
There you go.
So because of the situation in Ukraine, which dominates Smerconish.com, and obviously this program, all of the survey questions recently have been on Ukraine, including today's. Yesterday, though, a little deviation, because I was so into, we talked a lot about Ukraine, but we detoured to talk about the Williams sisters having been misidentified by the New York Times, Serena and Venus. In other words, in a story that was about Serena, the New York Times ran a picture of Venus. Many saw bias in that. And I came on air yesterday and said, I've often mistaken white folks and black folks, and always am mistaking names. In which of these situations is it indicative of bias or even worse, racism? So the conversation yesterday was around this issue. Is mistaking Venus for Serena Williams necessarily indicative of bias? 88.62% said no. 11.38% said yes. So 90-10. The calls yesterday, do you remember the calls were not so lopsided? There were many more people calling and saying these are issues of bias. I was in the 90% who don't see it. And maybe that's wishful thinking on my part, because I don't want to believe that I'm exhibiting bias when I mix people up.
And yet you talked about that there's science involved and data involved, that it is that white people have a harder time or have an issue separating or telling the difference between and among black people.
Right.
A woman called and said that she had always had that issue, that she and another woman at her law firm, people were mixing them up all the time. I thought these calls were really, really interesting.
Yeah.
But you started the segment talking about how you always confuse two actors from The Departed, Matt Damon and Mark Wahlberg. And
True.
that made me laugh.
Or maybe Leonardo DiCaprio.
We're not sure.
We're not even sure.
That made me laugh. But then you talk about Serena Williams and Venus Williams, and it makes me cringe. So there's something there. There's got to be something there.
Okay.
And also the New York Times, come on, they need to know better. This isn't a personal thing, right?
Yeah, but I don't think it was with malice. I
think
of
course not. They don't want to be wrong.
They were just sloppy. And obviously, Samuel L. Jackson and Lawrence Fishburne.
We played that audio.
And he handled it beautifully.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is 90% of the audience said not indicative of bias.
I was surprised by that.
Yeah, I was too. I thought it would go that way, just not that heavily.
Much, right.
So most of the headlines today, obviously, as I've been discussing on POTUS, are Ukraine-based. Thankfully, and I went with the Associated Press coverage on this, the fire is out at that Ukraine nuclear plant. Headline, Ukrainian firefighters on Friday extinguished a blaze at Europe's biggest nuclear plant that was ignited by a Russian attack. No radiation believed to have been released, but a pretty scary and perilous situation nonetheless. That compounded with the fact that French President Macron had a conversation with Putin yesterday, he is Putin's lifeline, and thank goodness Putin has at least somebody outside his bubble that he speaks to. Russian President Vladimir Putin called French President Emmanuel Macron on Thursday in what appeared to have been a markedly more tense exchange than previous conversations between the two leaders. After the call, Macron is convinced, quote, the worst is yet to come. There is a Politico story that I posted today at Smerconish.com talking about the domestic, meaning United States politics of all of this, and how Representative Sean Patrick Maloney, Representative Maloney from New York, a Democrat, said in an interview, listen to this, we're Zelensky Democrats and they are Putin Republicans. President Biden thus far reluctant to, sort of present the divide of opinion in this country on Ukraine, although I think this country is largely united in support of Ukraine in such stark political terms. The domestic ramifications also include escalating gas prices. Patrick DeHaan is the head of petroleum analysis at GoBuddy. He says that the average gas price in some U.S. cities is going to reach $5 a gallon in the next couple of weeks. San Francisco, as of yesterday, is already there. Gas prices averaging now more than $5 per gallon in San Francisco. The subject of oil drilling in the United States, Keystone Pipeline, reliance on Russia is also a big issue dealt with at Smerconish.com. The Hill coverage. GOP lawmakers are using rising gasoline prices and Russia's invasion of Ukraine to attack President Biden's energy policies, arguing that the administration has failed to improve U.S. energy independence. And then finally, and there are many, many more, but relative to the situation in Ukraine, I was watching last night when Lindsey Graham was on with Sean Hannity talking about assassinating Vladimir Putin. While discussing Putin's escalating attacks with Hannity, here's what Lindsey Graham said. What happens is that Putin looks at Biden, he sized him up, he thinks he can get away with it, and he's going to keep going and going and going, and nobody in the West is going to stop him. How does this end? Somebody in Russia has to step up to the plate. Is there a Brutus in Russia? Is there more successful Colonel Stauffenberg in the Russian military? The only way this ends, my friend, is for somebody in Russia to take this guy out. Well, survey question today at Smerconish.com asks, do you agree with Lindsey Graham that the only way this ends is for somebody in Russia to take this guy out? I almost, TC, didn't put Lindsey Graham in the survey question because I thought it would poison in one direction. It'd become a referendum on Lindsey Graham. And instead, I wanted it to be a referendum on the issue. But in the end, when I put quotation marks around it, I thought I was being, I don't know, I thought through omission
why
I was
hide
being
it?
dishonest.
Right. Why hide it? In other words,
it's Lindsey Graham who said it.
It's Lindsey Graham who said it. And I do think, in a strange way, there is some bipartisanship trickling through with Ukraine, which I did not expect to see. But maybe we'll have people thinking that is the way to go. I don't know. I
just don't know how practical
how does it end?
Tom Friedman is scheduled to be my guest on CNN tomorrow. And remember, Friedman wrote the piece where he said there are three possible outcomes to this. One is that Putin be toppled. By the way, the BBC has their own scenario. They say there are five possible outcomes to the way this all goes down.
Do they intersect?
Some of them do.
Do they intersect with
Some
Friedman?
Putin being toppled certainly is.
I can't wait for that segment tomorrow.
Okay, so as long as I'm on Cloak and Dagger, the subject of whether Putin could be taken out by the Russians, from the New York Times today, and I've covered this extensively in the past. Headline: CIA black sites are state secrets. Supreme Court rules. So this is litigation prompted by Abu Zubaydah, a Gitmo detainee. The Supreme Court yesterday shutting down efforts on his behalf to obtain information from two former CIA contractors involved in torturing him. Well, both of those individuals have been guests on this program. In fact, TC, I don't know that we've released for my book club podcast it's James Mitchell and the other guy, damn it, I forget his name. Mitchell, who are the two people who conceived of harsh interrogation and then oversaw the efforts?
Bruce Jessen.
Bruce
Jessen. Yes.
Okay, he's the other guy. So Mitchell wrote a book about it. It's like they haven't run for cover. Mitchell wrote a book. He's been a guest of mine here. And I have to say, when you hear from his perspective how he and Jessup were drawn into this, it's quite an amazing story. So if we haven't released it, will you remind me that I definitely want to release
100%,
it?
yes.
All right. So you go from, at Smerconish.com today, you go from Lindsey Graham advocating Putin's assassination on Hannity to the New York Times discussion of Mitchell and, did you say Jessup or Jessen?
Jessen. You know who you're thinking of? Someone, one of the royal family. There's someone in that orbit that you're thinking of. Jessen.
Certainly not Harry.
With an N.
Did you see that William
here we go.
And Kate,
what?
Of course, said appropriate things about support of Ukraine, and quickly Harry and Meghan had to get in. Oh, us too, and went to an award show or something.
Oh boy.
Okay, here it's a triumvirate. It's a hat trick. It's a threefer. So you got Graham advocating Putin assassination on Hannity. You've got the Times coverage of the litigation about Abu Zubaydah, the black sites, how much of that is going to come into the public domain. By the way, the issue here is the more that information comes into the public domain, the less likely anybody at Guantanamo ever gets a trial, because the more it becomes obvious that material used to prosecute them is fruit of a poisonous tree. Meaning, if you're going to prosecute them, then all that stuff is going to come out. Now, here's the third leg of this stool. From The Atlantic, Graham Wood had a sit-down with MBS. Quote, I've been traveling to Saudi Arabia over the past 3 years trying to understand if the Crown Prince is a killer, a reformer, or both, and if both, whether he can be one without the other. Before the meetings, I asked one of MBS's advisors if there were any questions that I could ask or could not ask, quote, nothing off limits. When we asked if he had ordered the killing of Khashoggi, he said it was, quote, obvious that he had not. It hurt me a lot. It hurt me and it hurt Saudi Arabia from a feelings perspective. I understand the anger, especially among journalists. I respect their feelings, but we have feelings and pain here too. Bottom line is this. MBS sat down with an interview with Graham Wood from The Atlantic. It's really interesting to read the piece. I posted it at Smerconish.com, not only for the substance of what MBS says about the killing of Khashoggi, but also just the backstory of what it's like to go to the palace and wait for Khashoggi. I wish it were Khashoggi. MBS, and to be able to conduct that interview. And then quickly, if I may, a few other headlines that have just not gotten any attention because of the Ukraine news, but are worthy. The RNC won't let up on the Commission on Presidential Debates. They're trying to choke off fundraising for the commission. Remember, this is Ronna McDaniel, the chairwoman, Mitt Romney's relative. Frank Fahrenkopf, of course, is the chair of the Commission on Presidential Debates. And the RNC, I imagine at Trump's behest, is like trying to lay down a marker that they are not going to play ball with the Commission on Presidential Debates. In a letter to the Commission on Presidential Debates, first shared with the Wall Street Journal, the RNC is recommending that the independent nonprofit shouldn't fundraise off the notion that its work might include GOP candidates. So this is the RNC saying to the commission, do not go out and raise money for your efforts by telling people that you will be hosting the 2024 debate because we're out. Frank Fahrenkopf, the co-chair, said in an interview he didn't expect the RNC's threat to affect fundraising in any significant way. The irony in all this is that Fahrenkopf himself is a former chair of the RNC. He's been a guest here before. I think he's a very straight shooter, honest broker, funny guy with amazing stories. But whether the commission gets to host the debates remains to be seen. 2 trials, 1 resolved, 1 ongoing. Brett Hankinson, not guilty, a jury in Louisville. He is the former police officer charged with recklessly shooting into a neighboring apartment during the raid that ended with the death of Breonna Taylor. So not guilty on all 3 counts of wanton endangerment in the first degree. He took the stand in his own defense. And here in Philadelphia, a jury is now out on the Amtrak 2015 crash. 8 individuals died. There are 250 counts of reckless endangerment Brandon Bostian is the Amtrak conductor. By the way, I'm still unsettled with the fact that there's only one person up in the front of the train, running the whole thing. But if you remember this, he was going twice the speed that he should have, exiting Philadelphia, going northbound. And he's got a great defense lawyer, one of Philadelphia's best in Brian McMonagle, who says it's not his fault. Essentially, the defense is that he was distracted because there were stones, rocks being pelted on SEPTA trains. He was getting reports of this. SEPTA is the regional mass transit system. And it distracted him such that, he lost control of the speed, meaning not criminal in his conduct. Whether a jury accepts that, we remain to see. God, a lot more. I haven't even mentioned Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago.
How could we wait this long
I have okay,
the program to mention this?
Okay, do you want to say her line or should I?
I can't.
Okay.
I can't.
All right, so
I guess I could. It would be more appropriate for me to say it.
I have the biggest D word in Chicago, she said.
Allegedly.
According to a lawsuit that was reported by the Chicago Tribune on Thursday. I couldn't stop thinking about the Zelensky video of the piano, if you remember. So that was the first thing that popped into my mind. I promise you no connection intended, but rather just because it's posted at Smerconish.com. Trans swimmer Leah Thomas has given her first, full-blown interview. I saw her interviewed in a podcast, but this is now SI. This is Sports Illustrated, that Leah Thomas, the Penn swimmer who has caused a kerfuffle and set a lot of records, is now on record.
And that, it's interesting, that interview, I am Leah, is how it's pronounced. It's how it's promoted. I'm a woman, just like anybody else on the team. I've always viewed myself as just a swimmer. It's what I've done for so long, and it's what I love. I get into the water every day, and I do my best. And she goes on and on and on. She's applying to law school.
Right.
Says the past 3 years have made her see all the ways she could help other people. And she's thinking about civil rights law so she can advocate for those who are marginalized, so she can help others the way she thinks they need to be going forward.
It's a really good interview. Thomas has been threatened and called so many times online that she turned off some direct messaging on her Instagram. She avoids mentions of her name online, especially the comment sections. I totally sympathize. Yeah. She told her parents not to engage in the fight. She asked her friends to stand down. She won't criticize teammates that she knows are rooting against her. I don't look into the negativity and the hate. I am here to swim, she said. Believe it or not, there are many more headlines than that. They're at Smerconish.com, but that's a recap of not only Ukraine, but what's been happening beyond Ukraine. If you're not a subscriber to the daily newsletter, I can't understand why you wouldn't be. It's free, and it is worthy. TC, that concludes today's newsletter cast?
Newsletter cast?
We're
not sure.
Yeah,
but we're liking it, and you're liking it, so thank you.
Back right after this.